Hello, I am Natasha von Imhof, co-chair of finance. I am doing a video today to provide some background information in preparation for the governor's budget that we anticipate will be dropped next week, February 13th, and then presented to Senate Finance on February 14th. So first is a little background of what brought us to where we are today. As you can see, up until 2018, our state revenue, which is the red line, was about 80% from oil taxes, which is royalties, production taxes, and corporation taxes. When the price of oil, the blue line, fell from over $100 per barrel in 2013 to the low of about $38 in 2016, our revenue, red line, fell as well. This revenue is total UGF, undesignated general funds. The spike in the red line for fiscal year 2019 is the passage of the percent of market value, which is a structured draw on the permanent fund, which boosted us an additional $2.7 billion in revenue. Now let's compare revenue to expenses. Here you can see the UGF revenue line in red again. The big free fall starting in 2013 until 2015 when it leveled out through 2018. Expenses, however, took a while to drop accordingly, and the big drops were in capital, which is green, and oil and gas tax credits, which are yellow. Agency spending, which is blue, didn't drop that much, and more on that later. Expenses clearly exceeded revenue for several years. Things changed in 2019. This is the first year the legislature passed a POMV, the structured draw on the permanent fund. How did we fill the gap in the previous years? The budgets passed these last few years did require significant draws on the CBR, which is our Constitutional Budget Reserve, or State Savings Account. When you add up all the draws on the CBR since 2014, they total a little over $13.2 billion. As of 12/31/18, there was a balance of $1.71 billion left in the account, and these draws were to support agency funding. So this next slide is just a grid to kind of give a background of the last few years. As you can see, we spent many days in session, which is column B, to reduce just a few million in agency spending. And so why do I say just a few million? Here we are looking at agency only, and this is actual government operations, which is Health and Social Services, Department of Education, Fish and Game, etc. So when we look closely, you sometimes hear the story goes, we cut a lot from UGF spending, $760 million. This is column C. That is a correct statement. But the story continues in that much of the UGF spending was backfilled by a combination of designated funds, other state funds, and federal funds, which is column D. So the actual reductions, which is column E for agency spending, was more in line from about $346 million. Because we didn't cut much, we actually ended up drawing a lot from the CBR, $13.2 billion in fact. It is critical to control our spending into the future that we have an effectual spending cap. So let's take a look at this graph here. The orange line represents the actual state spending for operations the last 30 years. There was a huge jump in spending between fiscal year 6 and fiscal year 14. That's sort of the M there that you see. The blue line is the spending cap currently in the Constitution, which has too high of a growth rate. The green line is what our spending cap would have been if we had a more realistic growth rate of population and inflation. It is more representative of our revenues and is similar to how our state calculates their spending caps. What are the opportunity costs of not having a realistic spending cap in place? During the years where we had a lot of revenue, we would have saved more. And during the years where we had big budget deficits, we would have spent less from our savings account. When we did a calculation, it's to the tune of about $15 billion that we have left on the table. Between the years of fiscal years, about 2006 and 2019, had we had an effectual spending cap in place, we probably would have left about $15 billion more in the CBR. So where are we now? The amended budget, like I mentioned previously, is expected to be presented February 13th. to the state legislature. In the middle of December, the Governor Dunleavy did pass a statutory budget, which was like a placeholder, and it gave us a little bit of clues of what to expect. The reduced revenue forecast in line 2 is based on $64 per barrel of oil, which we think is realistic, and that yields us about $2.2 billion in revenue. As you can see in line 6, there's a percent of market draw, which is about $2.9 billion on the earnings reserve of the permanent fund, and we feel that that is very accurate because that is based on a 5-year look back. We have a very modest capital budget of about $1.3 billion, and most of that is federal funds. And we have on the green line, line 27, paying a full permanent fund dividend of $1.9 billion from the earnings reserve, which yields us a little shy of $3,000 per person. After permanent fund dividends are paid, you will see the very bottom line in red, a $1.6 billion deficit. On a side note, just last week, the Senate Finance saw the supplemental budget where there was a suggested cut of $20 million from education. A very spirited debate ensued, and I'm curious if that is an indication of what's more to come. The options that we have to close the budget gap of $1.6 billion deficit is to increase taxes, whether it be on corporations or industry or personal, such as a personal income tax or personal sales tax, decrease the budget in the operations, or reduce the amount paid as a dividend. So let's talk about the permanent fund dividend. Here is a model. Now consider the saying that economists love, garbage in, garbage out. A model is just a hypothetical set of variables that runs various scenarios. It is by no means a prediction of the future. However, it does help shed some light on the potential consequences of the state's choices. In order to demonstrate how this works, I chose a particular scenario to run. Let's say the state did cut $600 million in operations. Now, granted, we've only managed a little over $300 million at our best, but here's to hoping. Which yields still about $1 billion deficit because we feel relatively confident in revenue. In this option, it also shows the state paying out a full permanent fund dividend in 2019 and also follows the governor's proposal to pay out the previous short-funded dividends over the next 3 years. And we fund all of this by taking extra draws on the permanent fund earnings reserve account. Those are the red bars on the top. The state then would deplete the permanent fund earnings reserve in about 6 years, which is the green bars on the bottom, and then followed by depleting the CBR, our savings account, in 2 more years, which is the orange bar on the bottom. Where does this leave the state? This leaves the state with no savings account, no cash accounts to invest in capital, to respond to emergencies, to invest in new programs, or to even potentially pay a dividend in the future. The Senate Finance is closely watching all the bills that are at play right now, and we are paying attention and thinking about how they're all interplaying with each other. The Senate is committed to finding solutions that are long-term, that are balanced, and that are good for all Alaskans. Thank you.